written at the end of the 14th century. But contemporary chroniclers, this depiction of this. Here's a different depiction. Bradbury's is the one that of Cressy that I think is better, is a better depiction according to the chronicles. Let me jump past these. Just very quickly, these are the Mary Rose arrowheads. Mary Rose we rely on quite a bit. Mid-16th century naval vessel evidently has longbows that both exceed the weight that was needed. We'll get into that in just a moment. But also have arrowheads that don't depict anything found in contemporary sources, contemporary archaeological sources. This is an arrowhead from the battlefield of Townley. It has steel edges. It is much stronger than a bodkin, which tends to curl up on contact with metal. And probably was similar to that when the wings were intact, although that's still up for debate. We do have some from Flodden that show some differences, but these show as well crossbow bolt heads and some weird bodkin-shaped things above that don't correspond to the ones in Mary Rose at all. All right, so guys, we're looking for an invincible weapon. This is the one we go after, the caltrop. Innocent, thrown everywhere. Archaeologists find them all over the place. You step on them, a horse steps on them, it goes right through, and they are immediately disabled and out of the battle. No need to contend against armor. Soft feet is all you need to. Oh, or this, the dagger, which is clearly disposing of an armored knight in one of his vulnerable spots from the Masiowski Psalter.
The English won the 100 Years' War. It's true they did, but let me point out that they won the war only, at least in part, thanks to the fact that they won the last two battles of the war, and in both of the last two battles of the war, cannon played a large role for the French. And yes, cannon do have more range than longbows. Secondly, they won the war only after a breakthrough in metallurgy, which took place, actually began in the early 15th century, but armor that was properly quench-hardened and almost twice as effective in stopping arrows as armor that was not properly quench-hardened, excuse me, only came into widespread use after Agincourt and Verneuil. So I actually think that that tends to support my point, which is that the longbow is extremely effective up until the point where armor became so good that basically no handheld weapon could get through it, and that's when you started to see gunpowder playing more of a role. As to the point that the numbers were exaggerated, I didn't really use much by way of numbers. What I used in my quotations from the Chronicles was statements that the French were defeated by or the Scots in some cases were defeated by the English archers. Some of those were contemporary sources, and at least for Agincourt, Warren, who actually fought in the battle. So I did not, but it's true that most of my quotations were not from eyewitnesses. Still, you have to ask yourself, if it wasn't the archers that enabled the English to win against tremendous odds, then what did? Leadership, obviously, I think was also necessary, and I specifically tried to make the point that the longbow was not a sufficient cause, but rather a necessary cause. In other words, if the English had not had longbows, if they had had crossbows or short bows instead, they would have lost. Now, they could also have lost in other ways, for example, being mishandled. And the longbow did not make them invincible. That is something that Kelly rebutted a number of times, but which I never said. Art can be a problem. I certainly very much agree with that, and Kelly covered that a lot, but I would point out that I didn't actually use art for much of anything except to establish the length of the bows, which I had also established by archaeology and a murder indictment record. Archers on the wings versus in the front. The reason that you put archers on the wings is because with any weapon, regardless of how it's effective or how powerful it is, enfilading fire is more effective than direct fire. What that means is that when you're using a bow, and especially a bow, if you're shooting at a line that is coming towards you, the trickiest part of hitting anybody is not dropping too short or too long, if it's at a fairly long range. If it's point blank, that doesn't apply, but at any kind of range it does. If, on the other hand, you are able to shoot along the line, parallel to it, instead of perpendicular, then you can have your arrow, come along, miss, hit. Right? See, it did come to blows, finally. All right. So when you position your archers on the flank, as they were shown in Kelly's diagrams, which I agree with, by putting the archers on the flank here, that gives them the opportunity, as the enemy skirts away from them and is funneled, which I believe it did. Kelly's right about that funneling thing being important. But as they funnel away from the archers towards the men-at-arms, who sort of are the stop, then the archers are able to shoot into their sides, which again, A, has the advantage of enfilading fire, and B, also has the advantage that if they're carrying shields, you avoid the shields. Which, at Agincourt, the front line, at least some of them did have shields. And on the wings, front. And I do believe in the importance of the funneling effect, as Kelly said, but I would point out that if you line up a bunch of guys with Nerf balls, they're not going to funnel anybody. It is only the fear of the arrows, caused by the fear that the arrows will penetrate their armor, that causes the men-at-arms to be funneled away from them. And so, Kelly said, I don't think it mattered if the longbow could knock down knights. Well, I think it did, because if it wasn't a serious threat, it wouldn't have any effect on funneling them. Kelly raised the Boucicaut plan for Agincourt. I would point out, and I don't know if we could get that back up, but the Boucicaut plan involved the archers the French cavalry avoiding the archers, going around them. Yes, that would have been a good plan, because if you go into the archers, they'll kill you. It's the plan. Yes, there it is. As you see, they're not going at the archers, they're trying to avoid them. And they weren't able to do that at Agincourt because Henry V sensibly positioned his forces so that the archers were anchored on each flank with woods. And I think that's all points I think about. That's it.
All right, I just want to, is that on and off? Yeah. I just want to address a couple of points that Cliff brought up in his initial discussion. We had planned or we had written our opening remarks without having heard each other, except for the last time we did it. Cliff mentioned a little bit of the archery trials, and there are constantly archery trials going on to substantiate, in England, to substantiate the longbow's power. And some of these, like Peter Jones, show a distinct striking and penetrating of the armor. So too do the Defense Academy ones with Mark Stretton that was shown by Cliff, although the findings were not published without having an afterword that was written by me, suggesting that the preconceived thesis was proven when they used the strongest bowman in